Welcome to the Angelic Frequency Podcast. We are your hosts, Cristina
and Luisa.
We are so excited to be joining all of you here who are tuning in, listening in. This is an exciting first episode of this relaunch of the podcast. And in today's episode, we are going to be sharing the story behind what is the angelic frequency, why we're here, and our intention with this podcast. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited to be here. This is great.
Yeah, it's so good. And I'm sure people are like, so who is this woman who is next to you here today? And so for those of you who maybe are just tuning in or didn't know before, I had a podcast called the Divine Connection Podcast. And I decided to take a break from it back in September. And through the story that we will share with you today, it all happened in divine timing that Luisa and I came together, and she is now the co-host of the Angelic Frequency Podcast, which I'm so excited to have you as a co-host. I feel like this is something that I have been wanting for a long time, and I think it just divinely happened. It's so cool.
It did. It was totally divinely guided, and it all happened. Yeah, they did it all. They set us up for this. So I couldn't be more happy to be here. It's been fast.
Yeah.
Too, right? But I guess if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. We connected months ago during the Healer program, which is something else that you do once a year. And we connected, and so much so that here we are.
Yeah, it's so funny how that happens. It's just so crazy. And I'm like, yeah, I kind of feel like we need to tell the story of like the step by step of how this all happened.
Yes.
Because I think it's such a perfect example of when you follow the breadcrumbs of things not like happening in a way that you didn't necessarily plan for. But then when you follow the breadcrumbs and follow the step by step, it kind of just all comes together in a way that surprises you, in a way that you wouldn't have even expected.
Exactly. Just being open to the guidance and just listening and letting them speak to you and kind of going with their cues. It's really important to be open like that. So yeah, interesting. I joined, let's take a step back even further. I think so, for context. So yeah, I stumbled, I've been interested in angels for many years now, and so every time I stumble upon any sort of like interesting book or content or account, I'll follow. And so a few months ago, I stumbled upon a book that the intro of the book is the author essentially talking about her journey with the angels and how she had this corporate job, and then things started to happen and go sideways. She decided to kind of turn the page into something different, went to the US for some angelic therapy training, came back, changed her life, and now she's in a channel, and she works back to originally I'm from Colombia, so back home in Colombia. And so I was so inspired by that story, and I was like, wait, something clicked. It's like, is that even an option and something you can do in life? And so I immediately start looking for angelic therapy, angelic healing, like trainings and courses and things. And then I found you, and the rest is kind of history, and allowing the angels to come through and guide us on this journey through the process, through the healer. It's such an incredible journey. And as we went along, angels started to send messages and cues that kind of led us here, and like through channel writing and different things and meditations, and they sort of gave us all the clues, and we put the puzzle together eventually.
Yeah.
But they very much told us that we needed to do this together.
Yeah.
And it was so aligned and so wonderful. And here we are.
It's so crazy how that happens. And, you know, on my side of things, like I mentioned, I already had a podcast, and in September, I came to a point where I was feeling burnt out from creating so much content. You know, I have my YouTube channel, I had the podcast, and on top of that, just my other social medias, my courses, just it was a lot. And I started to feel I don't I'm not resentful, but maybe a little bit frustrated or just a little bit like overwhelmed was my feeling that
Yeah.
came up for me when it was time to create stuff. And I felt that a lot specifically towards the podcast. And in that moment, that's when I knew that something had to change because it instead of feeling excited and inspired to do things for the podcast, it felt like it was a tedious other task that I had to complete or
Right.
accomplish. And I didn't want to do it from that energy. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm not going to post any more episodes. I'm going to give myself some more space so I don't have to have another thing on my list to do. And in that moment, I knew that that the podcast was not going to go away. Like I had already known that. It wasn't that I was quitting the podcast. I just knew that I needed a break to kind of just, I don't know, just figure things out. And so I took a pause. That was September 2024. And then during that time, of course, the angels were starting to show me other people's podcasts where there were co-hosts. And I kept seeing this. It kept popping up into my, just into my awareness. One of them was that Netflix show. What's it called? Nobody Wants This. Has anyone seen that?
Yeah.
Like they have a podcast on
course.
there. And so I was like, that's so cool. I mean, maybe not the context of what they're talking about, but I was like, that's so cool. Like they're just kind of like co-hosting this podcast. And I was seeing other ones in like real life too, but I just thought that's so cool. It looks so fun to have a co-hosted thing, but I didn't think much of it. I was kind of like, that's cool. Maybe one day I'll do that. Didn't really think much of it. Meanwhile, alongside that, you had come to me and you said, I forget what you said exactly. You said something along the lines of, how can I support you in any way, or like kind of doing any sort of work with you or something like that, right?
Yes, absolutely. That I was called to, like, I was just very much encouraged to just jump in and tell you I was so passionate about everything. And I still feel bad kind of to this day because I was so loud. Like, I feel like I was on every thread, every comment, every time something came up, I had dozens of questions and I'm like, should I just keep it to myself? Is this too much? And then I was guided to ask you if I could just keep this going because the course was coming to an end too. And I was so energized and I just didn't want to lose that. And as the course went along, there were so many ideas that came up and there was just this creative energy around being with you. There's so many things that you could be doing this and that. And so I wanted to keep contributing in that way. And the angels very much told me like to just go jump in. And the word they used was more of an internship. Like tell her that you just whatever you need me to do. If you need coffee in the morning, I'm here. Whatever you want. But and then from there, it kind of evolved into super timely again because we were wrapping things up. So it was that point where you start to ask yourself, how am I supposed to step into my higher purpose? And what is my next step? Where do we go from here? And then the guidance was Divine Connection Podcast. And I was like, wait, that doesn't make sense. That sounds familiar. At the time, I didn't connect the dots, to be honest. And so I was like, that sounds familiar, but I didn't think much about it. And when I mentioned that to you, you were like, oh, well, that's my podcast. And I was like, oh, no wonder. That's why that was a name that was kind of familiar and resonated with me. But I thought that like as a reference, like striving for something similar, not that we would end up here.
Right.
And then shortly after you followed up with me, you sent me an email.
Yes, because after you had said that, and I think it was right after we got off the call, it was like, it's hard to describe. It just feels like this whoosh of energy came in, like right after the call.
Okay.
It was like, because I think that conversation was towards the end when you mentioned something about like podcasts. I feel like maybe that's my next steps. And I was channeling and I was like, yes, they're definitely showing that podcast is your next step. At that point, I didn't know yet that it was our co-hosted podcast, but I was like, yeah, that's definitely where they're guiding you. And then it was short. That was towards the end of the call. We hung up the call, and then it was like this whoosh of energy came in, and it was like, she's supposed to co-host with you. Like, that's why you have this desire to co-host, and she's meant to do it with you. That's why she mentioned the Divine Connection podcast. So you would put the link together. And
Wow.
I think immediately afterwards, I was just like, I'm emailing you and letting you know.
Super shortly after the email came through, like, I don't know how you feel about this, but I just have to share. They just told me this and this. And by the way, I'm always super curious about how your mind works. So hearing you like walk us through the process and get a glimpse into, what that looks like for you, it's great. But yeah, it was super shortly after, and I was jumping up and down, and I couldn't believe it. I was so happy. I was like, yes, of course.
Yeah. I was so happy because I honestly was like, what if she's like thinks this is crazy, or she doesn't want to, or she's like, whatever. What if she says no? That like fear of rejection. There was a part of me that was like, am I being too crazy, too much right now? And like,
and by the way, on that call, I almost didn't say it.
Oh, wow.
It was the very last thing because you were like another like thoughts or whatever, and I just at the very end kind of was forced to say it, but I almost didn't. Because it felt kind of like, isn't this too much information? Does she need to know this? It's kind of my journey, right? And yeah, sometimes you just don't want to like. Even though those sessions are sort of meant to be kind of a coaching, I'm always in the back of my mind wondering if it's like I'm asking too much. Like, am I, should I ask that one other question? Is this too personal? Should I I don't know.
Yeah. I'm always like, ask all your questions. It's never too much. Like, this is the place. But I'm so glad that you did, because look at where we are now. And so then we basically started talking about it. You said yes. I was like, great. And then it started going from there. And we knew that there was going to be a rebrand. I knew that it wasn't going to stay as the Divine Connection podcast. And I feel like with us coming together, the Angelic Frequency name coming through, and just feeling like, coming together to be able to discuss in a more conversational way about spirituality, about the angels, about deepening our connection, about how we can deepen our spiritual connection with our own self, discovering our purpose, just like all of these topics that I feel people want to have conversations about, but maybe don't necessarily have the community around them to be able to have those conversations. And so it just feels like a fun way to be able to go back and forth and have these talks to help all of you who are listening explore your spiritual connection, and specifically with the angels and tapping into that angelic frequency.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think that's something else that we've been discussing a lot, and how you've created this safe space for us to have the weirdest conversations with no judgment. Like, in no other setting could you have conversations like this. I feel like for a lot of people, even myself included, like, this is not something you usually talk about with your friends, family, or like anywhere. With some exceptions, but this is not something that just comes up in conversation on your day to day. So finding a safe space for visibility, just knowing like, oh, there's people like me, and there's people like that are sensitive like this, and understanding your own journey through others, and normalizing certain things that you tend to get up in your head, especially around these topics, and you feel like it's all weird and it's just you. So just giving people a sense of community and a safe space to have these conversations is just amazing, and normalizing this. Just amazing.
Absolutely. I definitely agree with that. And I'm just so grateful that the angels have led, me personally, just from the very beginning of my journey to this point where I have been able to create this community, but also just the connections from it, and being able to meet people like yourself and, so many other amazing souls that I've been able to meet, and that I've seen people amongst each other connect with one another because of that. And so that's one of my hopes with this, both of our hopes with this, is that we are able to bring a sense of normalcy, or at least, whenever you're listening to this podcast on your drive to work or doing whatever you're doing, that you can tap in and just feel like, yes, like I'm a part of this conversation of, talking about higher consciousness and awareness and connection. And I feel like the more that we surround ourselves with that type of energy, the more that we are able to experience it and feel it in our everyday life. The more that when you go out and you're just doing your own thing, the more that you are already automatically tapped in, because you're thinking about these conversations, you're listening, you're tuning in. And I feel like it opens up a doorway, not just within our mind, but also within our heart,
Absolutely. That's so true. And yeah, that's something that I've noticed myself, like for the last, it's one thing to have a spiritual practice and to do certain things or rituals on your own, but then that's a way to tune in on your day to day. If you're anything like me, you don't stick to it. The consistency is key here, and you're not necessarily, life happens. We're all busy, so you don't necessarily have time every day to tune in like that. So having something like this, which will allow you also in a very like conversational, fun way, hopefully, to have just a conversation as if you were talking to your friends in your living room, about these things, that opens up that channel, and yes, very much connects you to that energy, and it's easier to just keep that door open and connect.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And speaking of that too, one of the things that I want to share is that people are going to have the opportunity to have a say, in a way, in terms of the things that we cover and talk about. We are going to have special segments called Dear Angels, where it's specifically answering your questions regarding a particular topic or a particular area when it comes to spirituality. And so that's something that you'll be able to access if you follow me. If you're on the newsletter or follow on social media, then you'll be able to get the information as we are preparing for those types of episodes, where it's a combination of, answering your questions around spirituality, but also receiving channel guidance. And it's a special way that you can submit your question and receive direct guidance from both of us. So I'm really excited for that part. That's going to be a part of this overall Angelic Frequency Podcast.
Me too. I'm so excited because I feel that that is one of the main goals, after all, to bring people in on this journey and to be able to address questions and bring them along on the journey. And create community around this.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Yep. And then the topics that we're going to be covering is really going to be a full range, everything from talking about the different types of angels and giving you practical tips and ways in which you can deepen your connection, sharing our personal stories and experiences throughout the journey. And, just really, I feel like as I'm saying this, it's almost like I feel like it's like opening up a door to like almost like the behind the scenes and helping to give more, not just guidance and practical tips, but also to just share more about ourselves and this spiritual journey, and how we navigate the ups and downs and the challenges. Like you said, life happens and things aren't always as consistent as we want them to be. We're both moms to young kids, so that's like a whole thing that gets thrown into the mix. That's like,
that could be a podcast.
Yeah. And even if you're not a parent, it's still one of those things where we all can relate to the fact that life happens and that we experience our own personal challenges where we feel like we don't have enough time, or we feel like things feel really hard, or just feeling disconnected, feeling lack of clarity, all of these things, hard to make a decision. We all, no matter what our life journey is, no matter what our current circumstances, we all have these threads, like these common threads that we all experience in different ways. So I'm really hoping that we can, open the door to that and show that we're all human. We all go through those experiences, but there's ways in which we can navigate it that is in integrity and aligned to who we truly are, and continue it, and helps to continue the growth and the connection that we experience despite those challenges.
Yeah, I think that's so important, because when we tend to see teachers and guides and coaches and all these people online and they seem like they've got it together. It's all so perfect. They do this
Mm-hmm.
100% of the time. And then again, that peek behind the scenes and seeing yourself in someone like that, it's really important because it makes it attainable, it makes it aspirational. You can actually relate to them on a human level, and that you can be
Yeah.
having the most wonderful meditation, connect to the higher realms, and come back, and then you something happens at dinner times,
Yeah.
uh, bedtime battles, all of that, and then you're completely out of balance and you're just angry and feeling all the feelings, and that's okay. That's part of the journey.
Yeah.
That's the whole point of the human experience, to just go through the whole range, but
Mm-hmm.
keeping that connection also as part of who you are, and what you do every day is important. So yes, it's all
Yeah.
not
Totally.
perfect.
And if there's one thing that I've learned on this journey is that it's not about being perfect. It's not about the having the perfect, mindset or energy or just like
No.
no things feeling like everything's thrown off. It's like, right now for me in this phase of my life, there are daily emotional tantrums and things that go on. And
Yeah.
so it takes a lot, there's moments where it feels a lot where it's like I'm holding the space for my kids to go through their emotional stuff. And I feel like, oh my God, like where's the room, any room for me? But then at the
Right.
same time, I've noticed that I don't need to be perfect in order to continue to maintain this
Hmm.
connection or to be able to show up as my full self. And
Yeah.
so, it's one of those things where I think before I thought that you had to be perfect. You had to have the right routine. If I didn't have
Right.
the channeling practice and this thing and doing that, then my connection to the angels would suffer. And then how am I going to show up in my business and how am I going to do all these things? And that's one of the biggest lessons so far in my life with my kids has been it doesn't perfection. It does not matter. You can still
Yeah,
show
you just
up.
do your best and you try
Yeah,
again tomorrow.
exactly.
But the wonderful thing about this connection, though, is that it gives you just another tool. We can
Yes.
all use another resource in those times of
Yes.
crisis. So when the meltdown's happening, stuff is just overwhelming. Just having the ability to connect and please bring in the higher
Hmm.
perspective. Please, angels, help me to shift this
Yeah.
energy. Please, just having them and using them as a tool in your day to day. I use them to help me get parking all the
Yeah.
time. So it's just having them as part of
Yes.
your support system in your day to day, and helping them, yeah, in your everyday life is such a wonderful thing, and to feel their
Yes.
presence as you move through life in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So it's absolutely wonderful to have an extra tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. So,
Yeah.
okay, this brings up a question that I want to ask you because you
Mm-hmm.
kind of set yourself up for this.
Okay.
My question is on like a daily, regular kind of day-to-day basis, how do you feel the presence of the angels most often? Like I know that there's different ways, like through meditation or channel writing or whatever, but what would you say is the way that you're like, yeah, I can feel them? Is it just like a knowing, or do you feel something physically, or how does it show up for you?
It's really interesting. I mean, I try to meditate as much as I can early mornings, or after bedtime, after my daughter's bedtime. I'll come in and try and meditate a little bit, and that helps me tune
Mm-hmm.
in. However, when I can't, there's very much an internal dialogue going on all the time. And I'm
Yeah.
just like, if people could hear that, it's just, I would be taken to a spatial place. But it's just an internal dialogue where I'm just talking to them,
Yeah.
right? All the time. Now that I know my guardian angels, like I'll say hi in
Mm-hmm.
the morning, and kind of tune in and try and connect. And just something as simple as that is getting up in the morning and hi, good morning, so and so, and just having that a second to acknowledge that spiritual realm around you. It really
Yeah.
helps you through the day. For me particularly, it's a very physical connection. I can feel them physically
Mm.
around me. So there it'll be a vibration or a tap, or they'll touch
Mm-hmm.
me in different places, and I know kind of I'm starting to be able to tell who it is. But for me, it's very like I'll feel them around them physically, and that energy will come through. I know for you, it's just a
Mm.
combination many different things.
Yeah, it's a combination of, yeah, it is. I would say the biggest thing is kind of like a knowing. It's like I can feel, I don't physically feel it, but it's like I can feel them standing. And they often stand, I feel like on my right side, kind of behind me, like around my shoulder. Like that's kind of where I
Mhm.
most often feel them. And even as you were talking and sharing, I was kind of thinking about it for myself too, where I've had moments where, I get distracted with life and I'm just kind of like doing the thing, like either, business or mom life or whatever the thing is. And then I can get caught up in the day to day. But then as soon as I take a moment to just simply tune in or kind of reach out, I feel like every time I
Yeah.
reach out to them, then it's like, oh yeah, you're right there. So I don't
Mhm.
necessarily always am like walking around. I can feel everyone's angels all around them all the time. It's not necessarily
Mhm.
like that. It's more so if I reach out and tune in, then it's kind of like, oh, okay, I can feel you there. But then I can also get so like hyper focused on the everyday life and in the 3D world that I lose sight of that for those moments,
Absolutely.
you know?
Yeah, it happens all the time. You just like, oh, how come I haven't said hi in a couple of
Yeah.
days? Like, what's, I'm so sorry, I've been ignoring you. So yeah, that does happen, and we tend to
Yeah.
get so focused on certain things. Life gets to be too much sometimes, work, everything, being a mom. So yeah, you definitely disconnect, but just taking a second. But it takes you reaching out. I feel like they're always
Yes.
there, but it does take
Yes.
you taking that step and opening the door and inviting them in for them to,
Mhm.
and they'll show you in a sec. I can immediately start feeling them like, yeah, here we
Yeah.
are. And it's the best thing in the world. um that's super interesting, but you were not always like this, which
No.
is also super interesting to go a little bit and just get to know you, your journey, and who you are, because when we tend to see
Yeah.
people like you and it's like, oh my god, she's a channel to the angels and she must have been born like flying or
Right.
something. And it's not necessarily like that. It's a journey and it's a progression,
Yeah.
and many steps that took you here. So maybe let's go back and get to
Yeah.
know. I mean, I know people who follow you probably know some of the stories, but let's
Yeah.
go back and
Let's
get to know
go
who you are
all
all
the
the way
way
back.
back.
Your upbringing, you were born very much a regular human being.
Yeah. Yeah. Born a
Um,
regular human being. Didn't have any sense of like, the only thing that I do remember that I realized after the fact when I started my spiritual awakening journey is that
yeah.
as a child, I did have an imaginary friend named Brian. And
Interesting.
yeah, and so I remember specifically Brian was his name, and he was my imaginary friend. I was maybe
Okay.
like 3, 4, 5 years old at the time.
Hmm.
That was the only thing that I remembered, but I didn't think of
Okay.
anything of it because it was just kind of in my head and like it's just my imaginary friend. Like I have a friend named Brian.
Right.
But throughout my whole life, I grew up going to a Catholic school, but not really practicing religion
Hmm.
anyway. I'm baptized Catholic. My dad's Catholic.
Hmm.
I come from a Cuban and a Russian background, which not a lot of people know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of like I grew up with a mixed culture, grew up in Canada. So it was one of those things where I grew up in a space where I also didn't really feel like I always belonged because it's kind of like I
Yeah.
had this like cultural background and
Hmm.
spoke different languages, like learned Russian and Spanish and French because of being in Canada and obviously
Right.
English. Never really feeling like I quite fit in because my parents were different and
Hmm.
whatever, this whole background. And so but grew up fairly normal. Like I said, going to Catholic school, didn't really practice much, didn't really go
Yeah.
to church, but that I learned that, just learning the basics through school.
Yeah.
And trying to think. And I never was really into angels. I Now that
Okay.
I am sharing this, I do remember that I would often get gifts from like relatives and people that were like angel statues or like these angel things.
Right.
But I was like, "Oh, cool, an angel, like whatever." I didn't really
Yeah.
care too much about them. I wasn't praying to the angels. I wasn't like, "Ooh, like are the angels around me?" Didn't ever question or
Never.
ask those questions. I,
Hmm.
I just remember like kind of the brief things of going to school and being like, "Is that really like is God really, this vengeful like
Hmm.
thing like energy
Yeah.
to be feared? Like I don't know. I don't know if I trust this." Just
Yeah.
that kind of a feeling. And
Something feels
then,
off. Something
yeah,
that feel, yeah.
exactly. Something feels off. I don't really know. Like, I'm not going to get too close to it. I just kind of observing, but whatever.
Yeah.
And then I'm trying to think. So, and some people know parts of these stories. So, 2012 was when I had like a major health crisis with eczema when like I had like a huge major flare up. Like my
Okay.
arms, my neck, like so many parts of me were just covered up in eczema. And that was a breaking point for me where I was like something has to change. At
Mm-hmm.
that point in my life, I was pursuing a career in science. I was still studying in university, but I was getting my degree as a biochemist and just kind of like pursuing that, like I'm gonna be, top researcher. I was always ambitious, but
Yeah.
it was like I was kind of following this path. And so that kind of really broke me down where it made me, I think, question everything and kind of really focus back on connecting to myself and who I was. And that was when I started to find people like Louise Hay and the
Mm-hmm.
concept of self love and the concept of your inner child and all these
Yeah.
things. So at that point, I was in my early 20s. And as I kind of started to heal because of this kind of internal focus, I was like, oh, I'm gonna help people too. And I'm going to, I'm not gonna I finished my degree, but I'm not going to continue in that way. I'm going to help people in a different way. And, started to study nutrition and health coaching and was thinking of going in that direction. Through that process, I somehow stumbled upon spirituality and started to read a book. I forget what it's called now, but a book that introduced the concept of a bigger kind of like that greater divine energy. Some people call it the universe or God or whoever, but this greater energy that is there for you and that we all come from and that is here to guide you into your potential. And that really kind of opened up the door for me. But still, I was kind of like, well, I'm just little old me. Like, I'm just going to try and
Yeah.
do my best. And, but through that process, going into the online world, finding Facebook groups and people, I started to understand and connect with people that, there's such thing as energy and chakras. And so that
Yeah.
was probably now coming into 2015, I want to say, where I started to explore the chakras and I bought this chakra book. And then that author came into town. I grew up in Ottawa in Canada. And so she was there doing a 3-day workshop. I was like, I'm going to sign up for her workshop. She was doing it at a yoga studio. And
Always
I'd
the
never,
breadcrumbs.
yeah,
Always.
exactly. And I'd never experienced anything like that before. I never did anything like that. I never went to 3-day workshops but
Right.
something pulled me towards that. And so I remember going through, it was like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I remember we kind of were like working on a few chakras each day. I forget what we started. I want to say we started with the root chakra. Like, so we would do like root and sacral chakra on day one, and then solar plexus and heart, whatever. We would go through them. And I remember on the second day just feeling so exhausted and feeling so drained and feeling
Mm-hmm.
so, oh my God, which now looking back, I realized that it's because I was doing a lot of energy work and clearing stuff out and moving
Oh,
energy,
right.
but I'd
Uh-huh.
never done anything like that. And so I didn't realize that at the time. Now I know what was going on. But anyways, that was a big introduction to me to understanding energy and just understanding the chakras. Then I started to, really explore people online doing energy healing work and meditations, but not just meditations, but actual like journeys and energy work
Yeah.
through the journeys. And I was thinking, whoa, like this is so cool. Then started to meet people again, online world, who were
Mm-hmm.
channeling guides, all these things. And I
Yeah.
thought, how like that's amazing. People can
Yeah.
channel with spirit guides and they can give you messages and they can support you and tell you what's going on.
That's
Like,
the thing. Yeah.
what? Like, how do you do that? But still, it was one of those. I wasn't born with that gift. I had never experienced that in my life. I never had a
Mhm.
moment where it's like I saw Jesus or an angel at the foot of my bed or whatever. So it
Yeah.
was like, I guess it's not me, but it's cool. I want to
Yeah.
hang out around these people because maybe they can give me some insight and they can help me on my journey, kind
Yeah.
of a thing, And And so I still was trying to pursue this business as a nutritionist and as a health coach while working a corporate job now in the
Mm-hmm.
science field. I was
Okay.
doing that whole thing, working my 9 to 5 as a toxicologist, and I'm trying to think what happened. So then I started to connect with a specific spiritual mentor,
Mm-hmm.
and she had this 3-month one-on-one program, and I was like, ooh, that sounds perfect, because to me it was sort of this intention of just becoming more connected to my soul, which is what I wanted. I
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to feel more
Yeah.
connected to myself. I felt this feeling of, I know that I have some sort of a gift that I'm here to share, but I don't know what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Never, ever, ever thinking that it had anything to do with angels or anything to do with being a channel or
Yeah.
doing energy healing work. None of that. That didn't cross my mind. I just felt like I wanted to be more spiritually connected to myself. So
Mm-hmm.
started working with her. This was now December 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And she was the one who first introduced me to Archangel Raphael. She was guiding
Okay.
me through a meditative journey,
Oh,
and I
okay.
didn't know that we were going to meet Archangel Raphael. She just said, there's this bright, bright energy that's coming in, and it's coming closer, and like feel the presence. And I was like, oh yeah, I feel the presence, like cool. Like it feels like this bright, bright energy.
Yeah.
And it was just such a profound experience of deep love. Like I'd never experienced that before. It was so moving to me. And after that, I was during that time also kind of doing my own practice of like, let me start to tune in, let me start to practice channel writing. I feel like I started to believe that maybe I can connect with my own guides and kind of receive messages through the channel
Okay.
writing process. And through that process, through the actual channel writing, they had said to me, you need to practice connecting with the angels because it's going to be important for you in your work.
Yeah.
They said that specifically. And I was like, really? Like angels?
How?
How?
Toxicology doesn't seem to have
Yeah,
a connection
exactly.
with
I was
it.
like, I don't see how that's going to work with toxicology. I don't see how it's going to work with being a nutritionist and a health coach. Like,
Yeah.
okay, that's weird. Like,
Yeah.
whatever. But I still trusted that. And so I started to, again, this is December 2016. I started to just feel like, I remember one night going to bed, and as soon as I closed my eyes, I could feel this green energy filling up the room. And I just
Wow.
felt like in my mind's eye, I just felt like the whole room was green. And I knew that it was Archangel Raphael. And
Wow.
I thought,
Beautiful.
yeah. And I thought, this is
Mm-hmm.
cool. I didn't know I could do this on my own. Like, I thought I needed
Yeah.
someone to guide me with the angels. I didn't know that that could just appear that way. And that kept happening. It kept happening where I remember another time where I was feeling so, I don't know, just like really low my confidence. I felt
Mm-hmm.
really discouraged, kind of like that moment, where you lack clarity and you lack focus. And you're like, what am I doing
Yeah.
with my life? Like, what am I doing? Who am I? I'm so
Yeah.
confused.
Yeah.
And again, it was like when I was going to bed. And in that moment, I felt this pink energy come in, and I kept hearing the
Oh.
name Jofiel. And she was helping me to accept more of my true self and where I was at on my journey. And just like, I felt like she was like mirroring back to me this kind of internal beauty, and to see that
Mm-hmm.
within myself. At that point, I had not heard of Archangel Jophiel. I had no idea who that was. And so I Google Archangel
It was
Jophiel,
Joe Field. Yeah.
and I was like, what?
And
That's
it
a
was
real
real.
angel? I was like, how is that possible? Like, that's so crazy. And so that just kept being a thing for me that whole month. And then at the end of December, I was doing my own meditative journey. At this point,
Mm-hmm.
I had been working with a spiritual mentor for maybe like a month or so, or maybe month and a half. And so I was getting kind of used to the practice of like getting into these deeper meditative states and
Yeah.
journeys. And through my own journey, I felt the angels coming in, like the whole group of angels, but specifically Raphael and Jophiel were the ones who came
Yeah.
in. And they were like, you are here to be a channel for the angels. You are here to teach about the angels. You are here to be a spiritual teacher, to support people in their angelic connection. Like, you're here to guide people on their journey to their purpose and to who they are. And like, that's who you are. And I was like,
Me?
what? Yeah, like, are you did you get the right Cristina? Because I don't know if you're talking to the right person. But something in me lit up with so much joy that it was like, that's who I am. Like, that's what I get to do. That's so
Right.
cool. Like, I think a
Yeah.
part of me in that moment knew that that was truth, even though there was also a huge part of me that was very afraid and very like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I can do that. What if I do it wrong? What if I disappoint
Right.
people? What if like I just started learning about the angels? Like, this is crazy. This is like what? And
What?
just
Yeah.
feeling so this like duality of emotions of like, this is what I've been wanting. Like, that feel like the answer to my prayers of really
Mm-hmm.
stepping into my purpose. And at the same time being like, that's nuts. Like, this is insane.
Right.
I don't know how I'm supposed to be doing that. Like, people are going to think that I'm crazy, and I'm going to disappoint people. I'm going to suck at this, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever, like that, all of that came up, all that chatter.
Right.
And then I had an experience shortly after that, maybe a couple days after that, where again, I was in meditation, feeling all these feelings of like just having this revelation and like processing it and
Mm-hmm.
still feeling those insecurities and things that came up. And in my meditation, Jesus came through. And he came in with this just such a like strong, compassionate, loving energy. And I felt like he was holding me. And basically he was telling
Yeah.
me, like, this is who you are. And you need to accept that this is who you are and that this is what you're here to do. And kind of like just that encouragement of like, you're going to be supported and guided every step of the way. And I feel like that was a huge turning point for me, because after that, I basically, right at the beginning of 2017, I was like, okay,
That's it.
I'm going to do this.
This is it.
Like, this is what I'm doing. At that time, I had maybe 200 followers where they were following
Right.
me for like health coaching and nutrition advice and kind of like
Okay.
that sort of a thing, like holistic health. So I
Mm-hmm.
was talking a little bit about spirituality, but not really, not to the
Right.
degree that
Right.
I
Not
talk
much.
about it now,
Yeah.
And so I just did a live stream and I was like, hey, like, this has been my
This
spiritual
happened.
journey. I've been on the spiritual journey secretly behind the scenes for however long, and this is what came up. And so this is what I'm going to be doing. And if this isn't your vibe, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, love you, see you later, good luck. Like, you can unfollow, it's okay,
Right.
kind of a thing. But to my surprise, there was a lot of people who were like, this is interesting, this is cool, like, I'm really
Okay.
curious. And then things just kind of took off from there. It was more than I could have ever imagined, but it was following those breadcrumbs.
Yeah. I've been hearing you for so long, and just hearing you tell the story like that is so incredibly interesting. And you can see the progression. You can see how you didn't just wake up and received a
Right.
revelation all of a sudden. It was like very much you opening yourself up to attuning to your own energy first, and then doing some
Mm-hmm.
work, and just little by little you open the door for them to come in and come through. And but you're never quite ready to hear something like that. I bet that was
Yeah.
really scary. And it happens to me all the time too. Like, me? Are you talking to me right
Yeah.
now? Are you sure? And where you just don't feel the confidence, and you just have to
Yeah.
trust them and take their word for it that you can
Yes.
do
Yes.
it.
Exactly. I think that's the biggest thing. It's that you don't have the proof. You don't have
Yeah.
the evidence right there that's like, you know, it's all going to work out. It's all like, this is the plan, just follow the
Right.
plan. It's really just, this is the next step right now. Follow this next step.
An
And that's
actual,
it.
yeah, a
You
leap of
know.
faith, and you just don't have the full vision. You just have to trust that the next step is going to lead you to whatever you're meant
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
do and to go. That's so interesting. That's great. I'm wondering what was because there seems there was a turning point there.
Mhm.
Like, your work with chakras, of course, to just get started, and there was where I feel like you started to
Yeah.
connect and feel and sense, and that's when it kind of opened up. But how do we go from there to like lights in your room and things like that? Like,
Right. Yeah. I think that from between like those two, one of the things that I was doing is just having a regular meditation practice. And so I remember I would wake up, like, I was very kind of like on that routine in that sense,
Okay.
where it was like, okay, I'm going to wake up before work, I'm going to meditate. But in my meditations, it was very simple. All I did when I first started, and I felt like I had no idea what I was doing, but I just felt this intuitive guidance, I guess, now that I think back to it, this knowing that came in. But essentially, it was at first, I was just focusing on my breath. I was like, I'm just going to tune in. I remember sitting in my living room couch. It was dark, it was in, just early morning, and I'm just going to tune into my breath. And so I would practice that, just being focused on my breath. And anytime my mind would start wandering, I would be like, come back to your breath. And I would just do that. That would just be my practice. Then, as I was learning about the chakras, I would just practice going through my chakras. Like, let me tune into my root chakra, let me tune into my sacral, and just kind of go through that process in that way, where I was simply focusing on that. So I feel like when I started, I wasn't necessarily trying to get anywhere. I wasn't trying to get answers or achieve a certain level of, connection or whatever. It was more so, I'm just going to be present and see how that changes. One of the other things I was doing was I started to follow different spiritual teachers online. So Gabrielle Bernstein is one example. Marianne Williamson is another example. And so I would just listen to their talks on YouTube. I would just listen to what they were saying. Dr. Wayne Dyer is another one that I really, really enjoyed his energy and like what he was saying. And I would just listen to them. I would read some of their books, but not when I think about the books, I'm like, how many books did I actually read? It was more, honestly, more listening. I was more of like a listener and listening to their conversations and what they were teaching and what they were saying. And so they were really just focused on this connection to the divine and what that meant. And so that would, I feel, start my mind to become open and contemplate those things as well, and kind of listen in for the truth. And it's like, oh yeah, you're right. And so then I would start to implement some of the things that they were saying in my everyday life. So for example, I would become more aware of how I was talking to myself. And I still distinctly remember, I forget what I was doing, but I just remember I was in my kitchen, and I remember I was like trying to do something. I made a mistake, and I was like, oh my God, you're such an idiot. Like, I was saying that to myself, and I caught myself, and I was like, wait, why are you saying that to yourself? No. And I would like correct.
Let's go back.
Yeah. And I would correct that. And so I would just start to do things like that, where instead of emotionally reacting and like snapping or yelling or doing something, I was much more self-aware. And so I feel like that was also a huge part of my transition during that time period, after the chakras and kind of moving into the more direct connection with the angels, was this shift within myself and my self-awareness.
That's so interesting. And I do notice that that's a very important part of that shift. When you start, going within to find the answers, not outside of yourself. And that's a really important part of it. And just, something as simple as tuning into your breath, closing your eyes, just checking in with yourself, and how important that is. And such a simple thing.
Right.
It's so important to this whole process, whatever it is that you're trying to do. Not everyone is here to be a channel to the angels, of course, but just in any direction, whatever it is that you're here to do, just that. That's a simple way to start whatever you're going. Tuning to yourself, tapping to your own breath, and to your own divine, like whatever you're believing, whatever you call it, but just tuning into your own divinity and whatever lives inside you. That's so important. And that's interesting how I can relate to a lot of what you're saying in terms of just finding, and I guess that's also part, like the breadcrumbs, the right books, the right video, the right person at the right time that'll connect. You start to also attract all of those things into your life, and you'll start to find things on your feed, on your local bookstore. Like, they'll find you and send you the message however you need to find it. So definitely hearing those conversations. I'm also very much a podcast or an audiobook kind of person. I love actual books too. But the reality of life and being busy is that listening to things is easier these days. But yeah, it's so important to like Gabby Bernstein, and in my case, like other people and other books and other resources, but just tuning in, just
Yeah.
listening about it and trying to connect that to your everyday life in the ways that work for you and that feel
Right.
true to you. I think there's a lot of it's really important as you tune into yourself also what you were saying in terms of traditional organized religion, and some things feel off and don't feel true, and listening to those cues and just take what feels true
Right.
deep inside your soul and just going with that. I think it's really important too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like as all of us, as we go on the journey and we surround ourselves, like create an environment. And I talk about this often of how, what are you exposing yourself to and what are you consuming? And not necessarily
Yeah.
physical food consumption necessarily, but what are you consuming visually on TV? What are you consuming in your ears? What are you listening to? And I feel like it really creates this environment around you that will either support your spiritual growth in your journey or not. And that's
Yeah.
just the reality. And sometimes we don't realize those things until we are at a certain point on our journey where we are ready to accept or to make a change, And so I do think that it's trusting in how and when it shows up for you in your awareness, and then following through with those changes. And one of the things that came through as you were sharing is that it feels like when we do create an environment around us that exposes us to, a higher consciousness, or these, just in general, these conversations that helps us in our connection, that it disrupts the conditioned state. So all of us are here conditioned in some way, conditioned in our beliefs, conditioned in our behaviors, etc. And oftentimes those things become so automatic that we don't even notice them or don't even think about them. And so when we start to listen or read or do whatever that is changing that is bringing in a higher level, a different perspective, it disrupts the regular pattern. And in that disruption, that's where the growth happens, because now you're starting to think about things differently, or you're asking different questions. And that is part of our growth process, I feel. And it's important to trust in how that happens and how it shows up.
It makes such a difference when you move through life either completely consumed by your day to day and just going through the motions, or when you see it almost from a narrator perspective and you're just looking at your human do things, but you're like just walking through life feeling like an embodied soul, that it's here for a higher purpose, that's doing something. Like it makes such a difference because you relate to your life in such a different way.
Yeah.
And you don't, of course, we all have emotional lives and turmoil and all those things, but you can disengage so much easier, and it's not as painful going through life when you can find the lesson, you can find the point, the purpose, and how to shift, and what's the lesson in this, and how do we move from here, how do we grow, how do we expand. That's a very different lens on life than just going with your day to day and just again going outside and why is this happening, and just being in that victim mindset. Why is this happening to me? How do I get out of here? Angels come and help me. That's one thing, but being open and aware that you're here, you're doing a purpose, this is happening to you for a reason. What do you need to learn? Let's call on the angels to help you see that so that you can move on.
Yeah.
It makes such a difference, and
It
it's
really does.
not so painful anymore, and then you can move through life in a different way. Not easy.
Yeah.
We don't do it all the time, but that's kind of the beauty of connecting with your spirituality and with angels. Again, see things from a different perspective with their help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest things that they do bring in, is that supporting us in the shift in our perspective and helping us to grow through the journey versus a feeling of like just fix this problem for me, please.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
shifting, like, please just fix this problem versus, oh, I'm going through this, like, help me go through this versus
Yeah,
trying to just eliminate it. Um,
absolutely.
I'm
Absolutely.
I'm curious to hear about your journey and kind of, you grew up in Colombia, and so I'm curious
Yeah.
to hear even just from a cultural perspective, and obviously everyone has their individual like family journeys as well, but your journey with spirituality, and if that was something that was either more prevalent for you growing up or not so prevalent, and like
Yeah.
how that kind of created the foundation for where you are today.
Yeah, it was just again just very much divinely guided, and you're born where you need to be born in the family with your parents and your
Yeah.
setting that's going to help you grow and come to your purpose. So yeah, very different environment back in Latin America, back in Colombia. I lived there for most of my life. I only moved to Canada 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So very much Catholic, traditional kind of environment growing
Mm-hmm.
up. But I was also, I didn't grow up going to church or anything like that, but I was baptized and did my first
Mm-hmm.
communion, all of that. So it's was very much a part of my life. I even went to Catholic school for a little bit there too.
Mm.
So it was part of my life growing up and part of my framework and my worldview. But what made a world of a difference was that I did grow up in a family where we had lots of people with different abilities and things that they could do. So I was
Mm.
also very much aware, and myself as well. So I was very much aware that one thing is to believe through
Mm.
religion that there's an afterlife and then
Mm-hmm.
this or that. And then there's another thing when you see it and experience it, and there's just a certainty that
Right.
goes beyond faith. I just know it's true, kind of
Yeah.
a thing. So growing up like that made a difference, and also trying to make sense, because while it was kind of all I know, and being from Latin America, we're very close to our families. We just
Mm-hmm.
That's the people who we connect with and grow up with and relate to. So it was so normal for me. We have mediums, we have healers, we have a mixed
Mm.
bag of all sorts of things in the
Mm-hmm.
family. Um, so just growing up seeing that, and that's something that people do, everyone.
Right.
Like to
Yeah.
one extent or another, we all have that. It just happens to run in this family and it's more prominent, but
Yeah.
everyone has that. And so for me, it was a little bit overwhelming just because I was growing up in Colombia in the 80s. I mean, this was not
Mm.
something that was mainstream by any means. There's nowhere to
Mm-hmm.
learn about this. Also, in the context of being Catholic, there's also things that are like, that's bad, that's wrong,
Right.
Um, so relating to it as much as I could from the little I could understand
Mm-hmm.
about my own abilities and what was happening. Um, so trying to make sense of it as much as I could. Also, my mom, she was born in the 50s, and she was trying to make
Mm.
sense of her own,
Mm-hmm.
gifts and abilities. So I grew up in a household where it was very much us trying to figure that out together, and that was our journey. So in
Right.
the library at home, I remember growing up reading so much. We love reading. So, but you could find a Bible and a Quran and the White Book of
Mm.
Ramtha and the Book of the Living and the Dead and metaphysics and Saint Germain. Like there was just
That's so
everything.
cool.
It was such an eclectic. To this day, I go to my mom's house and the library is like, what am I going to find here? It's so interesting. There's always a nice, interesting
Yeah.
book you can dive into. But it was all trying to get an understanding of
Mm-hmm.
what is this that I have and what am I experiencing and what is
Mm.
that's beyond, and trying to make sense of it all. So that was kind of the context that I grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bit, again, overwhelming for me, so I kind of shut the whole thing down, because when you're so sensitive to certain things, but you're just a beacon in the darkness, right? So you're attracting all sorts of energies,
Mm-hmm.
and that's usually spirits or low energies. So it was a little scary for me. So I just kind of never really had a practice, because when you open yourself up, you don't know what's
Mm.
coming through. And back then I didn't. I also knew about angels because of,
Yeah.
religion, but not necessarily had a connection with them. So there was a lot of fear associated with that part of spirituality. But on this other level, and just learning and reading books and trying to learn about it from an intellectual perspective, I was super passionate about that. And again, every book I came across, I read.
Yeah.
And that was interesting. But my connection with the angels came later. Two things happened that I think were key. One, Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism came into my life. And now that I look back, I see the point and I see why. It gave me meditation. It gave me practice. It taught me about breath and going within and concentrating and sitting down with myself. So that was really important for me. And then it set me up for all the things that were going to come after and opened a door that I had closed for many, many years. So that was one key moment in my life. And then right before I came to Canada, I was talking to my mom, and she got one of those like downloads, and she told me, you know what, I think you're going to work with angels. I think there's some healing attached to that. I think there's something there you should pay attention to and explore. And again, back then I didn't have really an established practice or anything, but I was very curious. And being my nerdy self, I went to my local esoteric bookshop and bought like books about angels and things like that, and started to read and get curious and meditating with the angels for the first time. And that's when kind of it all started. And they were so critical in me coming to Canada and helping me in that like process. So I really like relied on them and started to connect with them all the time, because I was just so scared and anxious about the whole process and leaving home behind and family and this whole new environment. So I really leaned on them. And then that's the first time I was able to feel my guardian angel. And identify it as my guardian angel, because I can, again, sense a lot of things, but I just don't know what they are. So I immediately like close the door. So I was able to feel my guardian angels for the first time. I thought it was just the one, but I started to feel like different sensations, and just talking to him, them, back then. And that was my one of those key moments that led me here. Then just connecting with different spiritual like guides here in North America. It's a very different environment, of course, and there's a lot more information, it's a lot more mainstream. Also, the times changed, and it just became part of the conversation. It wasn't before, and being exposed to different things here really made a difference in that sense. And I feel like in the last few years, decades, there's been an explosion of wellness and well-being, mindfulness and spirituality. And there's all sorts of like guides and people that have started to produce content and put it out there. So yeah, Gabby, in my case, Sonia Choquette, but also different authors and conversations with God and A Course in Miracles, and just connecting dots here and there and having that coming to my awareness and always being guided to the next book and the next thing. And that's how I found the book we were talking about at the beginning. Right? That's how I found Maria Elvira Pombo, which is a person back home, and she's a channel for the angels as well. I came across her book and also seeing someone, and it clicked, just like with you. You can do that. Right. You can become that. Right. So it's like, of course, I've been aware of my own abilities and people in my family and whatever. But for me, somehow, it was just something that happened somewhere in a dark room with a crystal ball and tarot cards. You know, it was just when you hear medium, you think of something like that, not necessarily the modern version of how you can put those abilities to use. Yeah. So it clicked. And I was like, you can do that? That can be just what you do for a living? You connect with angels? So it just, something clicked, and it was very obvious, but somehow I hadn't really connected the dots until recently. And so seeing people doing that really made a difference and made that a possibility in my mind. And that's how I found you. And just very similar to what you went through, working with a specific guide at the time, going through like an in-depth course in mentorship that allowed me to tap into this whole connection in a very different level, and that has progressed in a wonderful way over the last few months, and being able to
Yeah.
channel right and to feel them and to kind of hear them and get guidance. It's been a wonderful journey and a very non-scary way
Mm.
to reclaim those abilities and those things that I've always had within me,
Yeah.
but I've always kind of put to the side just because I was very scared. So this provide a safe
Mm-hmm.
connection to that side of me.
That's
That,
incredible.
yeah,
Oh my gosh, I
yeah,
love that. And it's so cool to just see how, we obviously all come from different journeys and different backgrounds, but how one way or another we are somehow
yeah,
led to the opening up, to the connection. And it always seems to happen in like a breadcrumb type of
yeah,
way, like
totally.
and of course there's those pivotal moments that you can pinpoint, like that really shifted the trajectory, or this
Yeah,
book or this situation really started to change how I viewed things. But at the end of the day, I feel like the angels provide that kind of support and guidance in a way
mm-hmm.
that we're going to receive it. Like for you, it was through that book, and just little by little the things that showed up, and the different guides that show up along the way, like in your case with your
Right.
mom sharing that message that came through, and for you
Yeah,
to pay attention and be like, okay, I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind. You know what I mean? and
yeah,
it and it kind of reminds me of how we all have those kind of characters in our life that show up
yeah,
as these different roles to guide us and to support us. And you never know what it's going to be. There's no prediction or knowing, like, okay, this is how my journey is going to unfold step by step in this way. It's one of those things where it's like we just have to trust that where we are right now is exactly where we're meant to be, because it's preparing us to be able to fully receive what we're meant to receive next. I'm sure that if you had gone through that a few years earlier, you probably maybe would have been like, I don't know, this is too much, or this is crazy for me, or I don't know if I can,
yeah.
and I think the
Huh.
same thing for me too, where it's like if I had received that message earlier on, I would have been like, no, this is too much. This is too crazy. So it's like everything
Yeah,
that we go through prepares us for what's next, but we can't predict what's next. So we have to trust where we are right now, you know?
exactly. It's so frustrating. I feel like, yeah, it's just we're just blind and trying to find our way through this spiritual realm. But that's so true. We're not ready until we're ready.
Yeah.
And the key is just to going back to the beginning of our conversation, just to staying opening and allowing, giving space for those things to come true through, for
Hmm.
that guidance, for that person to come into your life and tell you what you need to hear, and trusting that, oh yeah, that's a sign, or that staying open to that,
Mm.
those messages, and to the angels coming in, and they'll always give you a clue. And for me, what I always say is, and for you, I know it's a chakra like expansion kind of confirmation.
Yeah.
For me, it's just whatever, I will feel a vibration, but if it makes me smile and it's like, this is coming
Mm.
from you, like you just, there's a knowing, but there's joy. And there's
Yeah.
always like, of course, it can be a scary thing to think about the things that come through sometimes, but whatever it is, just that feeling of just like joy, and
Hmm.
you're safe. It's okay. I know it seems like a lot, but you got this.
Yeah.
That
I love that.
inner, yeah, peace and joy that comes whenever they speak to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I 100% resonate with that. It really is one of those, when they speak to you, it's not this like out of a space of like rushing, or you got to do this, or the fear of missing out, or, whatever. It's always that like very peaceful,
Yeah,
calm,
always.
simple, also,
Simple.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one of those things. They speak, yeah, in riddles. And it can be frustrating because they'll just give you a word. They'll just give you a little hint, and you're like, English, you
Yeah.
got this. You can just tell me the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're supposed to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So,
Yeah.
I love this conversation
Me
so
too.
much. This was such a great, I feel, intro podcast. And for those of you who are listening in, we would love to hear from you. So if you are watching on YouTube, there is a comment section below. So please feel free to share below what resonated most with you from this episode. Share a little bit about your journey and where you come from, what your experience has been like, and any other reflections that you want to share below. We absolutely would love and appreciate that. And if you are watching or not watching, you're listening on a podcast platform, then we would absolutely be so grateful for your reviews of the podcast. This is something that helps boost us in the algorithm and helps other people to find us so that they can tap into the angelic frequency. And the other cool thing that we have going on is right now there is a fun giveaway that is happening that is based on your reviews and your comments and your sharing. So all the details for the giveaway and how to enter and where to enter and all that, you can find the link for that below in the show notes. So click below, you'll see the giveaway space, and on that page you can find all the details of how to enter and what you need to do to be a part of the giveaway. So we're so excited to hear from you. And other than that, is there anything else that you want to share, Luisa? Anything that we forgot to share with the people?
With the people. Yeah, no, I think that's it. And just inviting listeners to sending their questions, their thoughts, things that you want us to talk about in future episodes, like whatever it is that comes through for you, please send that in. Would love to do that and just to have conversations about things that you care about and you want to hear about. So
Yeah,
hopefully that.
absolutely. I love that so much. So with that, thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We will see you very soon on the next episode. So make sure that you are subscribed or following or whatever the word is to be a part, download, be a part of the podcast and the show. And we can't wait to come back with more. So
Yeah.
that's
See you
it for
next time.
today. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.